Let's say you've started a stretching routine just to lose momentum and stop and have to start over again. If you're having trouble making progress with your stretching routine and staying consistent, watch this video to learn my tips for staying consistent with stretching, knowing if you're getting the right results, and also knowing when to add on strengthening as that important next step to build stability of your curve. Welcome back to the Strength and Spine YouTube channel. My name is Dr. Beth Terranova. I am a physical therapist who specializes in working with people who have scoliosis, as well as a person with scoliosis myself. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to get more consistent with your stretching routine and how to figure out if it's actually working or not. Because I know a lot of times we can feel like we're spinning our wheels and not making a ton of progress. The other thing I'm going to talk to you about is when to add strengthening to your exercise routine to kind of take it to that next level and really fortify what you've done with your stretching routine. So maybe you're relatively new to exercising or stretching with scoliosis. You've just started, let's say, a program that you brought home from your physical therapist, and you're finding, wow, I am so busy. I literally do not have time to do all of these stretches and these exercises. So the first thing I'm going to teach you is how can you build consistency with your stretching routine so that you can see the best results. What we find with our clients is that building consistency is much more important than the intensity of what you're doing. If you have the best exercise program with everything in it that is going to address the issues you're having with scoliosis, but you never do it, it's not going to help you. And we find that with our clients, even our clients who have a short 10, 15-minute workout routine, as long as they do that routine consistently, they can get results. So you don't need a ton of time stretching to see some good results with your scoliosis. The first thing I tell people is start small. Start with a 5-minute action. Can you find 5 minutes in your day to do 1 or 2 stretches that are going to benefit your scoliosis? You really don't even need equipment to do some of these stretches, especially if you look back at our last video where I demonstrate the elongation stretching. You can easily fit in 5 minutes of that per day. Once you do that initial 5 minutes, you might say, hey, I can do a bit more, and then you can always increase from there, but you have to start. So start with just 5 minutes of stretching built in somewhere in your day. And it doesn't have to necessarily be at a certain time of day or a certain area you need to do the stretches in. Literally, you can stand up from your desk at work and do 5 minutes of stretching, or you can take a break while you're cooking dinner and do 5 minutes of stretching. Just a little bit can make a big difference. This brings me to another point in how you can add consistency to doing your stretching routine is you can mix it or pair it with another habit that you're already doing. So think of habits that you literally do every day without thinking about it. For example, brushing your teeth. Every morning you wake up and brush your teeth. Pair that with 5 minutes of your scoliosis stretches. So you put together, okay, every time I brush my teeth, I do my scoliosis stretches. Or maybe pair it with when you're cooking dinner and say, okay, after I chop the vegetables, I do 5 minutes of scoliosis stretches. Even at work, in between conference calls or meetings, figure out a time of day where you know you can set aside 5 minutes for your scoliosis stretches. Pair that with your lunch break or another time that you know you always stop working for. For many people, it can be helpful to keep track of their consistency with their stretching. So making yourself a checklist or checking it off in your planner can be a really helpful way to have that reminder that you did your stretches for the day. Our clients find this piece of our app super helpful to remind them to do their exercises, and then they just go in and check off those exercises. I think it's one of the greatest feelings of checking things off your list. So you have to make the list in order to be able to check the things off. But when you do start checking off all those days per week that you've done your stretches, it can make such a big difference in how you feel. And if you're really struggling in making time for yourself, like many of us do, hey, I've been there myself, small business owner, busy physical therapist. Sometimes I literally have to block a time in my calendar for doing my stretches. So I have to literally make an appointment with myself to do those exercises. And that might be what you need to do in order to get yourself consistent with your stretching routine. And think of it the same way that you would have an appointment with your friend. If you decided on a time to go out to lunch with your friend, you wouldn't just ignore that appointment. So if you make that appointment with yourself, don't ignore that appointment. Get in, even like we said, that 5 minutes of stretching at that time can make such a big difference in overall how you feel. The funny thing that usually happens with our clients when they start exercising with us is they initially might be, oh my gosh, I'm so busy, I don't have time for this. But once they get started and they start doing those stretches, they start doing our exercises, they start feeling better. So then it comes back and motivates them to continue. So especially if you're having troubles with motivating yourself, maybe you're feeling stuck in your scoliosis journey, or you're feeling like you're just not getting the right information to get started with, start small, repeat that process from what we teach you here in these videos, and you can see big difference over time. That being said, big changes with scoliosis can take time. So let's chat a little bit about how do you know if the routine you're doing is actually working? Well, we spoke about the first thing, which is you actually have to do the routine to know if it's working, right? If you're not doing the exercises, then it's never going to work. So first you have to start by doing the stretches and by putting in the work to see if you're going to notice a difference with those stretches. And we tell our clients it can take some time to notice those differences, especially if you've had scoliosis pain over a number of years, right? Give yourself a few days or a few weeks with these new elongation stretches to be able to see if you notice a difference. And sometimes, especially if you've had pain for a very long time, that progress or those changes can be very gradual. So you might miss them if you're not specifically tracking or paying attention to how you're feeling with your routine. So here are some things to look for to see if your stretching routine is working. One of those things is that you notice less stiffness over the course of the day. Now, this one can be a bit challenging because sometimes people will really notice stiffness or tension throughout the day, and it can be hard to tell whether it's improving or not. So look for things in your day that you're noticing less stiffness or tension with. For example, if you notice that standing in the kitchen for 10 minutes usually brings on some stiffness or tension in your curve, and then after doing your stretching routine, let's say for 2 to 3 weeks, then you notice, okay, I can stand for 15 minutes before having that tension come on. That's an improvement. Even if you're still having that pain, you're able to do more activities before that tension or pain kicks in. So often what happens is people get to that 2 to 3 week mark and they say, well, I'm still having tension, and they just give up on the stretches, not realizing that they're able to do more before they start having that tension, which is a positive progress for them. Another area where people can see improvements with a consistent stretching routine is they might see improvements in their postural alignment. When you're evaluating yourself, this can kind of be the hardest thing to see because you see yourself every day. So it's harder to see the changes over time. Many times when our clients get compliments about their posture improving over time, they're coming from potentially their friends or family members who are noting to them, hey, you're standing taller, you're not leaning forward as much when you walk, or things like that, because it's hard for us day to day to kind of see the changes in our spines. So another helpful way to see if you're making progress with your stretching routine may be to take pictures of your back to kind of monitor your progress over time. Now, this can be really individual to each person. Some people are not comfortable taking pictures of their back. Some people have trauma related to looking at their curve or the history of their treatment related to that. So of course, tread lightly with this and only do that if you feel that it works for you. Another thing that you might notice as you start to add stretching into your routine is you might start to notice just more general awareness of your spinal alignment. When you're doing the elongation stretches, you're going to feel that length of your spine, and that elongation also helps to get you in a more neutral position with less rotation and with less side bend of your curve. Often our clients tell us that they start to realize when they're not in that alignment. So if they get consistent with the elongation work, their brain starts to take that as more their neutral position. So sometimes they'll tell me, well, I was waiting in the grocery store and I realized I was leaning over to my curve. So I used a little bit of that elongation stretch just by putting my hands on my hips and thinking of being as tall as I can, and that helped to reduce my pain. So if you're noticing more when you're in and out of a more neutral, elongated position, that can be another way to tell you that your stretching routine is working for you. Many people will see benefits of doing the stretches alone, but what we found with our clients is when we start adding strength training, it takes it to a whole another level. Because now you've created this really even elongated position of your spine. How can we stabilize in that position? How can we teach your body to be in that position with more ease and more support? And that's where the strength training piece comes in. So how do you know when it's time to start adding strength training to your scoliosis exercise routine? First, you've gotten consistent with that stretching piece. Maybe you've done that for a few weeks and you're noticing some improvements in your posture and in your alignment in your day-to-day activities. Now that you've prepped those muscles, you've gotten them more flexible, they can be more receptive of the strength training in a more neutral position. Another indication that it might be time to add strength training is if you're no longer having that stretching sensation, right? So let's say that you have improved the flexibility or made it more balanced side to side, and now things feel more even, and now you know that you have enough flexibility that's within a normal limit. You can start adding strength training now to reinforce that flexibility and maintain it for the long term. Because where many people go wrong is they stretch, but they never start to strengthen their body in that new stretched position. So their muscles just kind of start to revert back to their original length. This is why a big part of our Stretching with Scoliosis course goes through what is the normal range of motion for this joint, let's say the knee joint or the hip joint, and testing that for yourself. Because if you have the appropriate range of motion, you could maybe go directly to strengthening that area instead of having to go through that stretching process, or maybe stretching an area that already has appropriate motion that you're spending time doing but is maybe kind of spinning your wheels. So with stretching, as with any exercise routine, number one is always developing consistency. Once you've developed that consistency over a period of a few weeks, looking at the results and looking deeper than just, did my pain completely go away? Looking at what activities you can do more of, what feedback you're getting from family, friends, and others, and also Where are you in terms of next steps? Are you ready to start adding strengthening? Have you reached your potential with the stretching? Is it time to now really add that next step of building that stability? And of course, if you're not sure where to start, our Stretching with Scoliosis course has a very guided outline of how to evaluate yourself, how to understand more about where and when to stretch, and of course, when to move on into strengthening instead of only stretching. Remember, small steps over time can lead to big progress, and your body can do a lot more than you think when you give it the time and the strategic progression of the right exercises for your scoliosis. In the next video, I'm going to go even more into detail about active range of motion using your muscles versus passive range of motion when you stretch your muscles, how to understand the differences, and how to use that to guide yourself towards more of a stretching or a strengthening routine for your scoliosis.